So question 2, if you're developing a marketing plan for a product, do you look at regional differences in your marketing plan? Do you have one national plan, or do you have multiple regional plans when you do that currently today? 80-20 rule. Most people have a national plan. Makes it easy. One of the challenges with the specialty business, though, is that there's no single Canadian market. Again, look at HIV, the market our company deals in, incredibly regionally diverse. Out west, you have single centers of excellence. St. Paul's Hospital in BC runs the provincial HIV program. One center, one organization, I would even suggest one physician, determines everything that happens in that province. Go out east, you head to Ontario and Quebec, it's a family care, family practice-based model, although you have 3 or 4 large multi-group practice clinics that act almost like an HIV hospital. So you have this regional diversity in how care is delivered. You also have regional diversity in how the actual drugs are reimbursed. You have provincial programs in BC, you have the ODB and RAMQ in Ontario and Quebec. The evidence base to approach this is very high, which then leads into reimbursement decisions, clinical practice decisions. You might have a completely different set of guidelines and a different view of the evidence in British Columbia than you do in Quebec or Ontario. And in addition, as we've seen earlier, the role that the private sector plays in funding is you now are developing multiple tiers in the specialty market as the provinces offload more and more cost onto the private sector for funding in areas like oncology, like HIV, like some of the other specialty areas where you have to consider different levels of access, different levels of criteria between the two groups. So as a result, you almost need to develop a multi-tiered key account regional marketing approach. You still have a general marketing objective, but we're finding, and we've been forcing our team to look at more and more, is we need to develop separate regional marketing plans for all of our therapeutic areas. In terms of reimbursement criteria, we heard earlier some of the challenges of getting reimbursement in this country. I think one of the other challenges is when you come to actually develop your forecasts and your plans, what's the real indication? Health Canada provides an indication to use the product in the treatment of X disease, but your real indication might end up something like this, and this is back from 2005. These are the BC Cancer Agency criteria for use for Herceptin in adjuvant disease. So an oncology drug, a targeted cancer therapeutic, this is effectively what your indication is for the use of this drug in the province. Health Canada might say one thing, but at the end of the day, with respect to reimbursement criteria, you've got to think that this is the actual indication you have. What does that mean? It means a lot in terms of your forecasting, in terms of your ability to move in the marketplace, and also in your ability to actually put reasonable targets out there for senior management in terms of, we have a first-line indication this drug is going to take off. The reality is it might be sort of a low and slow growth pattern that you face over a couple of years. Just moving along, a couple last slides. In terms of another key challenge, and this is, I think, very much an ongoing challenge, is just how do you communicate, how do you market in this marketplace? This is our current indication for one of our products. It's a HIV antiretroviral called Truvada. It's a backbone agent in an HIV regimen. 2 key studies in the label. The earliest of those studies, 903, was conducted about 7 years ago, and 934 was published 4 years ago. This is a sampling of topics at recent HIV conferences, current. MI risk associated with antivirals, a couple of ACTG studies showing the benefits of earlier treatment, beginning to show some evidence around the use of tenofovir or a component of Truvada in pre-exposure prophylaxis, and a look at new agents. The science evolves very quickly, and I think one of the challenges in the specialty market is your physicians, your customers want to hear about those recent topics, how they impact their practice. Your current label, your current indication from Health Canada has things in it that are essentially old news. How do you deal with that communication challenge? And that's something in terms of the medical affairs team. And a third and final question, do you have medical or scientific affairs included in your brand team? Yes or no? Good. 70% of you do, 30% not. The role of medical affairs. So with those communication challenges, and I think the challenges of these specialty markets, clearly medical affairs has to be part and parcel of your brand team. And whether that's either MSLs, managing advisory boards, providing conference coverage, even face-to-face interactions. I always tell people, don't dismiss the role of a really good medical director in your company in terms of what they can accomplish with your key customer base. And even looking at things like medical information, your medical information department, how are you using that as a communication channel to deal with those off-label requests that come from physicians, to deal with that information need that exists out there? We can debate whether it's on-label or off-label. The reality is it's an information need from your customers. How do you deal with that? How do you best serve that request? So just to sum up, some key strategies for success in terms of the specialty market. There's a number of them here. I think, again, collaboration between medical affairs and regulatory affairs is that broader brand team absolutely important. Improve the level of evidence supporting your products. If you think about these customers, they're evidence-driven. They write the guidelines. They write the reviews. You've got to make sure that you meet that need. And ensure enough resources are allocated to what I would call the non-traditional communication channels, MedInfo, MSLs. Make sure that you have or plan and look to how to utilize that. Conference coverage. You live from conference to conference. Innovative pricing and funding approaches. There's has to be more and more pricing and funding approaches to deal with the challenge to the fact that we launch products without the full evidence. How do we get that evidence while still getting market access? And make sure your forecasts account for systemic barriers. You might have physicians in place. How much clinical time do they actually have? We have a hepatology program in Calgary where 6 hepatologists, 75% of each one of their time is research protected, which means they actually only have 25% of their time for clinical work for about 5 different hepatology conditions. If you're trying to sell HIV, or I should say hepatitis B or hepatitis C to that group, how much time do they really have to see patients? How does that affect your forecast? How does that affect your expectations for senior management in terms of product uptake? And at the end, remember, it's a process of selling science. You're doing the two pieces together, and I think that's really the essence of specialty marketing, is that you have to remember you're selling science at the end of the day. Thanks.